Catus Maximus here. Figure I'd do a quick video on in this case it's a Gearwrench T15 18-inch extra long screwdriver. Should do another refresher video on extra long screwdrivers because they are handy more than just for extended reach situations. Many times I mention automotive engine bays, but there's a lot of situations where you just need a little bit more narrow and longer of a driver, and these gear wrenches are pretty cheap. This is a slightly older model with the red handle. I think they have the orange dual overmolded handle. Pretty decent. You know, nothing too special. I do like that it's slightly trilobular. You know, just because that's a really comfortable, natural position, and then the lobes tend to be a little bit sharper, so if your hands are slick, you can still get a good grip with the screwdriver and turn pretty good. They do the carbon tip, which is probably the best thing. They advertise as being anti-slip, but when you chrome plate, it can cause some degradation of the surface right where the chrome plating is, so just having a black oxide tip, which will of course wear the first few times you use it, nonetheless it means the steel's a little bit more of a quote-unquote natural state. I will give a little credit for their packaging. The packaging is a little easier to deal with nowadays, or at least with these. You just had these two little tabs, so you could easily just pop it out of the packaging rather than having to wrestle around with a knife and that kind of stuff. So I'll give them some credit there too. Back to why long screwdrivers. Flatheads, you usually get them larger because they kind of are impromptu, kind of smaller style pry bars. But that long reach is not just in situations where you have whatever equipment, electronics, etc. that you're working with. Once again, automotive situations where you have to have a long, narrow driver just to reach down into a hole. But the ergonomics, and that's what I found, is even though it's obviously a long screwdriver, harder to get right into the screw, and you usually have to have your other hand to stabilize it. But many times when you're operating a screwdriver, I mean, you're reaching out, and that's actually not the most comfortable position. Actually, I was just noticing you can barely see a gear wrench. Nice laser etching there. I mean, you can barely read that. It's the part number, Torx. I mean, I don't know if we can... There we go. Part number, Torx, and 15 by 18 inch. That's kind of interesting. They later etched all the information on it. But nonetheless, you're not reaching out as far. So many situations, long screwdrivers can be safer because you can be in a more balanced or natural position, especially if you're working on step ladders, etc. Any kind of precarious situation. Because, of course, you're not leaning over as much, you're not extending yourself out as much, which adds to safety. It also can add greatly to, you know, if you're doing not just assembly work, but if you're somebody who's in a workshop fixing power tools or using screwdrivers a lot throughout the day, just being able to have your hand down at more of a natural position, or maybe have it closer to your body, actually makes it a lot easier to use the screwdriver, especially if you're spending a lot of time with one. That's what I kind of like about them, and half the time I don't mind just using them versus shorter screwdrivers. Sometimes I use the shorter screwdrivers, but sometimes it's real nice just to be able to reach in. I've also found that doing YouTube videos, always having to reach around my camera. I don't have like some complicated overhead crane or whatever some of these YouTubers have, but nonetheless allows me to reach around the tripod and be able to easily access and work with some fasteners. And I'm also realizing my hands aren't all in the way. It actually allows me better visibility while I'm working on, because once again, instead of my bulky arm being in the situation, it's just the thin rod of the screwdriver. And actually I just picked up this Milwaukee. I was going to make a video about it. They could have done a better job sealing that upper bearing. On a side note, confused myself for a second. Why the heck is there an electronic circuit in this corded plug-in AC palm sander when it doesn't have variable speed? In order to get a thinner body, Milwaukee, this is actually a permanent magnet brush DC motor, like in older cordless drills. And those do provide the ability to have a much narrower diameter motor because you don't have a wound field. tend to be a little bit cheaper as well. But stuff does like to build up around the permanent magnets because they're always quote-unquote active. So oddly enough, that's just a bridge rectifier with no capacitor. It's not smoothing the power at all. It's just converting the alternating current to pulsed DC current and running the motor for the sander. Anyway, enough of that tangent. As far as how this screwdriver works, it's just fine. You know, on these Milwaukee screws, pretty good fit, but not the tightest. I've run into some Torx bits and screwdrivers that are manufactured on the larger end of the specification or the tolerance spectrum. And what's kind of nice about having things like sockets that are really tight or bits that are really tight is they actually tend to, at least at the beginning of their life, really work nicely because they just get a really nice, sharp, fully deep grip into the head of the screw on the outside of the fastener. And then as the tip wears, it starts to become have the tolerances of most normal drivers, and you tend to get a bit more lifetime out of them as well. Not to say this Gearwrench isn't too bad, and versus Phillips, one of the nice things about Torx is you can see there is quite a bit of a straight section. When they start to dull out, or if you strip the tip, you can usually get away with grinding a 1/16 of an inch three times on Torx screwdrivers, and so that's what it's nice about them. Is all you have to do, or a file is just when they get stripped or dull, all you have to do is just grind it down a little bit until you're back to some good flutes, and it's kind of a nice thing for longevity of Torx drivers. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching. See you next time.